Hello and welcome to Tell Me How You Did It. I'm Namrata Zakaria and I'm here to bring to you my handpicked list of some of India's finest brands. Yes, our best homegrown companies that can compete with the world's best and still win the battle hands down. These companies range from food, fashion, and film to home, art, and design. I'm only too happy to talk to the founders who not only chased their rainbows, they also made India proud. Make sure you tune in at htsmartcast.com week after week to shake the hands that built our best businesses. Listen to them tell me how they did it. The world of interior design, furniture, and architecture is going through a massive transformation in the last few years. Indian companies celebrating authenticity, craft, and a very local-centric design language are really coming into their own. Leading this pack is Phantom Hands, a Bangalore-based gorgeous but young company. Architects speak of it in hushed tones, almost as if in reverence. It was started in 2015 by founder Deepak Srinath. Phantom Hands now enjoys cult status. Deepak is here with me today to tell us how he and his company are Indian design's best kept secrets, phantoms, as it were. Welcome to Tell Me How You Did It, Deepak. I'm really glad to have you here.
Thank you, Namrata. It's my pleasure to be on your show. And thank you for the wonderful introduction.
You started out Phantom Hands as a curated site selling vintage, antiques, collectibles. How did you chance upon making furniture there?
Well, like you said, Phantom Hands started life as a curated catalog of vintage objects. This was in 2013 when I was still in my investment banking gig. So this was more of a hobby project. Vintage objects, especially vintage furniture, was something that has always fascinated me, especially the stories behind these objects. And my original idea was to make Phantom Hands a marketplace for curated vintage objects from India. Down the line, we realized that they were not, while it was great as a hobby project, when I took the plunge and got into it full time, I realized that there wasn't enough well-made objects that we could source to make it a full-time business or to make it sustainable. Around that time, I discovered the story of Chandigarh's furniture, the design history of Chandigarh, and the story was fascinating. It drew me in. I made numerous trips to Chandigarh. The design spoke to me, the clean lines, the simplicity, the utilitarian purpose, the functional aspect of the furniture, all of it resonated deeply with me.
This became your launch collection, right?
This was our launch collection, you're right.
Yeah.
So I think at that point, the idea of making furniture was something that was, that I was toying with. And also kind of diving deeper into the Chandigarh story, I realized that there's not, while a lot of vintage products, vintage pieces were being, sold internationally and all of that, many of the vintage pieces or even the pieces that were being made currently were very poorly made. The quality of craftsmanship was not as good as, the really old pieces that one still saw in museums and offices in Chandigarh. And therefore, the idea of re-editing these pieces with a quality of craftsmanship and materials and, making that could make these pieces fit into our contemporary homes, contemporary lives, make them more robust. That was the intention behind starting the first collection.
But why is Chandigarh so important? I mean, the city seems to inspire designers, architects endlessly. And for you, especially at Phantom Hands, you'll use it as the starting point of, this modernist India sort of design language, that whole ethos. So can you explain that?
Look, I think just Chandigarh's architecture is incredibly well known. Not much was known about the furniture that was created for the city until about 10 years ago.
The genre chairs, for example.
The chairs that are popularly known as genre chairs. But yes, not much was known about the furniture. Ironically, the West discovered the Chandigarh furniture story much before a wider audience in India did. As it's well documented now, a number of French vintage furniture dealers came to Chandigarh, discovered this furniture. Uh, they took it out of India, they sold it in auctions, and created a lot of awareness and almost hype around these pieces. So once that happened, and then the news of these pieces fetching huge prices in auctions began to get around in India. That's when people in India suddenly started noticing these pieces, or even trying to understand the history of these pieces. So uh, anyway, to go back to your question, I think Chandigarh is fascinating because, especially the furniture of Chandigarh is fascinating because it was, in my mind, the world's first open source design project. There were about 100 designs created, maybe more. I think a lot of pieces are not documented even. And they were given out, the blueprints were given out to several carpentry workshops to make, to modify as required by a specific site. The design language was then adopted by several Indian architects and designers who produced these pieces or variants of these pieces over a 30-40 year period. And the design then, it wasn't restricted to Chandigarh. The design language sort of permeated across the country, and one can find similar pieces made in a similar style in government offices in Bangalore or Chennai or Lucknow, and I've seen these pieces. So it really kind of became a kind of pioneering modern Indian design story. So I think that's why Chandigarh is so fascinating.
Can you share your some examples of your re-editions of this Chandigarh ethos?
Sure. So we started with 3 chairs and more. It was more of an experiment. It wasn't something that we seriously uh, sought. We didn't even know if there would be a demand for it, or anybody would buy it, or any of that. We just kind of looked at several vintage pieces and decided to re-edit 3 of them. One of them is popularly known as the office chair, with the signature inverted V legs or compass legs.
Yeah.
One of them is the easy armchair, and the third one was the X leg office armchair. Okay. So we made 3 of these, and then sort of prototyped them with a couple of carpenters, and put them on. At that point, we were still doing the antiques website. So we put them out there, and nothing happened for a few months. And I was at that point on the verge of thinking that this is not going to work. And then a couple of people actually bought these pieces, but ironically they didn't buy it for the design. The wood that we had used was reclaimed timber from a well-known school in Bangalore, whose auditorium had been demolished. So alumni of that school got wind of that we had used the wood and purchased it because they wanted some connection to their school. They didn't know anything about or much about the design history. So
that's sweet too.
Yeah. So that was our beginning, and and then like a lot of brands or ventures, there are a couple of serendipitous things that happen which really propel the brand or business and help. So something like that happened with us too. An interior designer from London called Nicholas Chander came across our website, saw these chairs, and got in touch with us. Nicholas is somebody who was Paul Smith's interior designer and had done the interiors of many of Paul Smith's stores across the world.
Yeah.
So Nicholas contacted us and came down to Bangalore to see us. And at that point, we were literally two carpenters and a dog in a garage apart from me. So but nevertheless, I think Nicholas liked the thought behind the endeavor, the quality of what we were producing, the authenticity in terms of the craftsmanship that we were using to produce these pieces. And he placed an order for 40 odd pieces for a very high end co-working space in New York. And we that was an incredible learning experience for us, making these pieces, exporting them. We learned about logistics, packing, all of that. And it was very well received. The the co-working space is called Spring Place in New York, and in fact, I've heard that Leonardo DiCaprio, opened it and he sat on one of these chairs and things like that. So that's how we got noticed. And then a number of architects and interior designers, especially from Brooklyn, that community, saw our furniture and they became our customers. And then word of mouth
Yeah,
happened. And
yeah, yeah.
mm,
They're incredibly stylish pieces and definitely very, very original. But I want to talk about your sourcing of wood because you touched upon this reclaimed wood from the auditorium. A lot of what you use now is reclaimed wood, and the new wood, you are committed to verify the source.
yeah.
So, why is this important to you? Is this just an environmental um, consciousness that you'd like to promote, or this is just some sort of responsibility that you want to take as a company?
I think both. I think you cannot be a furniture maker and not be conscious of where you source your material from. Of course, I mean it is because wood, at the end of the day, a tree has come down for you to make your furniture. You cannot run away from that. But uh, nevertheless, I think we do have a responsibility to make sure that the wood that we use is not illegally sourced from by illegally felling trees in a forest where it wasn't supposed to have been chopped
Yeah.
down. Or therefore, I think reclaimed timber is also extremely important for us. We try and use as much of reclaimed timber as we can, because that you know it's kind of the circle of life in a way. So most of the reclaimed timber that we actually get is from buildings that are demolished. The quality of teak wood is extremely high in most of these old buildings. But uh, very often, the problem that we have is the supply of reclaimed timber is not consistent.
Yeah.
So we have to supplement it with new timber too. And we try and so we actually source it from a timber dealer that we know and trust immensely. And they so we verify, they actually show us the authorized government documents and things like that uh, that come with it.
Well, that's the planet. But your name, Phantom Hands, which I love, takes care of people as well. It's almost like an homage to artisans, to the hands that sort of don't get the credit across any craft, especially in India. So why was passing this credit on so important to you?
I think the name originated from our vintage furniture days, because we, beautifully made pieces, but nobody knew who had made them. So they were, literally phantom hands who had made these pieces. And when we started making furniture, uh, we found that it was still apt, because while we now knew who was making these pieces, our artisans are all generational craftsmen who had inherited their skill from their fathers and forefathers. So in a way, there were phantom hands behind the skills that manifested in these products. So the name was still apt. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, now we try and of course, I think, be it our social media, be it our website, we try and make sure that our craftsmen and craftswomen are not phantoms anymore. We try and, their names are published, their stories are published, we talk about them, but still the name remains apt.
We see it across India, right? The crafts always remain at the bottom of the supply chain, and almost in all cases, they receive the least where the distribution of money from the price tag is concerned.
Yeah, yeah, that is very true. Um, and while there are a number of efforts, I mean, not just with furniture, but I see awareness of of sort of responsibility towards crafts and craftspersons spreading a lot, but I think there's a lot to be done still.
Yeah,
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 absolutely.
yeah.
There's also remarkable importance that you've given to cane weaving, which obviously I presume comes from the whole Chandigarh design language. But can you tell me why it's so popular now, cane weaving?
I think that's a good question. I think it's not just, I think globally we're seeing a resurgence of cane furniture. I think it ties, so I think because there is such a move towards handmade products, products that are especially, artisanal products versus industrially made products. I think cane is such an obvious manifestation of a handmade product.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is, it's a skill that's very tangible, that's very, and so I think therefore cane furniture has seen a revival in recent years, and yeah, so therefore again and also given that we started with the Chandigarh collection, and the contemporary collections that we make also have cane as as a very important signature element. Many of our new pieces have that too. So we continue that tradition of cane being.
I don't know about other Indian cities, but in Bombay, it's like a very Bombay Parsi club colonial. It's part of our design language as well. It's
Yes,
as Bombay as Art Deco is, I think.
I mean, very much in South India too. I mean,
Yeah,
our plantation chair,
yeah,
colonial
yeah, yeah,
furniture, also places like Chettinad in Tamil Nadu, where
yeah.
there's much there's such a rich furniture history. So cane has always been an important part of our furniture in South India too.
I
So
love that, interior designers as well as furniture designers in India, they've moved to, Indian textiles for the upholstery. It brings authenticity to the design as well as the product, and it goes very well with that whole um, Indian crafts language idea as well. So I want to ask you about your commitment to using hand-woven textiles for your upholstery.
yeah, that's a good question because it's something that's very close to my heart. We've we started with cane furniture, but a couple of years ago we started an upholstery unit, and we now have a collection of upholstered furniture, both from the Chandigarh design era as well as contemporary pieces.
But is it all hand loomed, hand woven, or it's a mix of?
Not all of it. So when we started off, we used uh, and we still produce some pieces with industrial with velvets and wool and very high quality but industrially produced fabrics. But our core philosophy and our value system was always aligned towards handmade textiles, and especially Indian textiles that were craft based. And so there are two collaborations that kind of helped us um, foray into sort of put it out there. I think maybe you can edit that, but so let me just rephrase that.
Do you want
So
me to
there are,
repeat the question? I can. We can totally go
yeah,
back
yeah,
to
yeah,
the start.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great. I love that interior designers as well as furniture designers in India are slowly but sure-footedly moving towards Indian textiles for the upholstery. And I see that with you at Phantom Hands as well. So, do you want to tell us a little more about where you source your textiles from and how committed you are to use Indian fabric?
Sure, Amrita. That's a question that's very close to my heart because upholstery, we're very the Indian upholstery that we use is something that has come out of two very meaningful collaborations that we have established over the past year. One of them is with a textile maker called Zanav, based in Bangalore. Zanav is owned by Ravi Khemka, who
Okay.
for the past 25 years has been a pioneer in terms of research and development of handmade textiles in
Yeah.
India.
Yeah.
So when we first met Ravi about 4 or 5 years ago, but we weren't ready to start working with him yet. So after a number of discussions and brainstorming sessions, we finally decided to collaborate with him to develop a special range of textiles that was suitable for upholstery.
Yeah.
So we launched a collection recently with Ravi, which uses handmade cotton linen blends, and even raw silk as upholstery material. And a lot of R&D went into making them robust enough for upholstery usage. And that's one collection. The other collection that we launched is with a textile designer called Padmaja Krishnan,
Yeah.
who runs her own label, fashion label, based out of Mumbai. So Padmaja worked with uh, patchwork fabric. So she, from the waste that is generated by the fashion industry and
So
specifically,
it's upcycle.
it's upcycled. So we use, so each chair that we make with Padmaja's textile is unique because it's a one of a kind design made from whatever is available at that point,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's hand stitched and put
Yeah.
together, and
Yeah.
so that's a very special collection too.
But that's a new collaboration, right?
That's a new
Because
collaboration.
I think you've just announced it. Tell us about all your very exciting international collaborations. I mean, there's been one with Derek Welch, there's one with the Excellence Studio. I'll let you tell me more.
So, the Chandigarh collection was what we started off with, but I was always clear that while that was our origin story, if you will, Phantom Hands was always about carrying forward that legacy and not just looking back and, at the past. So we were always looking out for contemporary designers that we could collaborate with. And it was really important that our values aligned with whoever we worked with. And I happened to see a chair designed by Inoda Sue. They're a Japanese-Danish design duo based out of Milan. I
Okay.
came across a chair of theirs in Milan and immediately fell in love with it. So I reached out to them and met them in Milan. This was in 2017.
This is during their design week festival.
It was not during the design, but I went specifically to meet them. And
Okay.
we were just a small workshop at that point, and they were quite well known internationally. They already made chairs for big names, big furniture makers in Japan. So, but we just immediately connected, and they completely understood what we were doing and what our philosophy was, and they loved the idea of designing for craft-based production, because the other furniture makers they worked with were used much more industrial methods of production, CNC machines and the likes, but they loved the idea of designing for the hand. So they came down to our workshop in Bangalore, spent a month with our craftsmen, going back and forth, and created the first contemporary collection called the Mungaru collection. Um, Mungaru is a word in Kannada which means cool monsoon breeze. And
Oh,
they were here
nice.
during the monsoon
Yeah.
season. So
Yeah.
that's how we ended up naming it
Yeah.
the Mungaru collection. And yeah, and then subsequently they've come back a couple of times more and created a second collection called the Tangali collection, where the
Okay.
focus was very much on innovative cane weaving patterns. So they pushed our cane weavers to do things that they had never done before. And that was quite interesting in terms of weave patterns, in terms of just you know the way one approached the weaving process and things like that.
And they took this back to Japan or they sold it all over?
No, so the way we work is they design for us and then we license the design. So we have an exclusive license to produce and distribute the furniture. So we are responsible for distributing and selling the furniture.
But I love this idea of, like this global cross-pollination. Everything is committed to crafts or made by hand. And it's still, it feeds the world, right?
Very much, very much. I think one of the challenges that craft in India faces is a lot of end products that come out of extremely high level of craftsmanship are not relevant to the contemporary world. And unless you marry craft with contemporary design, craft is not going to survive.
You
So
don't think
that's
that works? You think that applies today, even like in a post-internet world? Because I work very closely with weavers across India. I see what they do. And sometimes I can't tell if a sari was made by, a weaver or if it's Abraham and Thakur or raw mango. I think the internet has sort of flattened that design intervention a little bit.
I mean, perhaps I don't know if it's a one size fits all kind of philosophy, but especially with furniture and
Yeah, of
certain other
course.
crafts,
Yeah.
if you the end form, the design should work well in modern apartments or
Yeah.
contemporary settings. If you make a chair, if you make an extremely ornate chair with a lot of carving and whatever,
Yeah.
it could work in a certain kind of setting, but it doesn't have the universal appeal that a more simple minimal design will have.
Also, maybe the functionality, right? A sari is a
Very true.
sari is a sari anywhere in the world, I suppose.
Perhaps. So
There are so many like copycats of Phantom Hands. I mean, I can just Google and, so many of these random e-commerce sites just pop up, which is so similar to your design language. Do you bother with them or do you just ignore
look,
them?
I think so. The Chandigarh pieces, like I said, are open source, so anybody can make them. There's no
Yeah.
restriction on them being made, I think. But what we see is people copy everything from our photography style to the text on our website. So
Your
that.
website is fantastic. It's like a
Thank you.
magazine.
Thank you. But I think the problem we have is when people copy our contemporary designs, because those are exclusively licensed to us, and those
Yeah.
a lot of people have already copied, not just in India, but we've come across copycats in France, the Netherlands, and ironically, it's much easier to take legal action outside India. So in Europe, we've successfully shut down two of these copycats, but in India, it's a lot harder to do it.
You just have to be flattered, I guess.
Yes,
Be
yes.
flattered and just love it.
I mean, it honestly doesn't bother me too much. so, so
I want to ask you about your sales model, which I find, a little slow, a little unusual. So customers either place an order on your website or they place an order with one of your retailers across the world, and you have multiple sources in Hong Kong, South Korea, the Netherlands, everywhere. Tell me how your sales model works out for you.
when we actually had an e-commerce site 3 or 4 years ago, and we shut that down and decided to go offline. When I say offline, customers write to us, they discover our catalog on our website, write to us, and then there is a process, there is a conversation that happens. So this is something that I was very keen on. I didn't want us to become an impersonal e-commerce site, because the experience of
Is everything made to order then?
we do not carry stock, or we carry very little stock. When a customer places so the models that we make are fixed. So we have 30 odd models that we make, but yes, we make them when a customer places an order with us. So it's a very personal approach to sales.
And why do you do that? How does that work out
I think
commercially?
I think it's really firstly, we are not a mass producer. We never want to be a mass producer. So there's a limited, because it's craft based, there is a limited bandwidth that we have for production. And in some ways, I think if a customer really wants to buy our products, they perhaps go that extra mile in terms of, just actually, I wouldn't even say go that extra mile. I think it enhances the customer's experience too, because then they're talking to us. They have, there's so much of back and forth. There's feedback on, what kind of finish they want. There are things that we can customize. Like, for example, we inscribe personalized messages on some of our chairs if our customers want them. All of this can't happen over an e-commerce website.
Yeah.
So it's a very personalized sales experience, and that is really important to us as a brand, and that is part of our brand ethos.
And it's also collaborative, right?
It's
It's
very
not
collaborative.
just buying something off a shelf or buying something off a website.
Right? It's very collaborative, and if you order a chair from us, if a customer wants to know who made it, and there is we can we've had customers who even asked us for photographs of the carpenter who's made their chair, or sometimes they want a signed note from the carpenter. So we can do all of this. How would you do that on an e-commerce site?
So it is an emotional purchase as
Yeah,
well.
very much. And when you buy a Phantom Hands product, and I always say this, you're not just buying a piece of furniture. It's so
Yeah.
much more.
Yeah. And I think that's how companies are moving, they're becoming smaller, more intimate, more collaborative, where every hand that has sort of touched the product is sort of acknowledged, right?
Very much, very much. And similarly, the dealers that we work with, we're very careful about um, selecting our retail partners. We spend a lot of time, much like the process of finding designers to work with, the
Yeah.
retailers so we say no to,
Yeah.
so many retailers who approach us from around the world, who promise us like, whatever, 100 pieces a month. Or, I mean, we don't go by. Of course, numbers are important. Profitability is important. You need to sustain the business, but that is not the only criteria. We work with dealers and retail partners who understand our philosophy, are happy. They usually boutique shops who.
So, Deepak, how do you find the balance between a sustainable business model and something that puts such great value on craft?
I think it hasn't been too difficult, to be honest. I think because while I think somewhere the fact that I come with a solid business training, and I come from the world of finance, and while the philosophy is very clear, I also have a very strong sense of operations and costs and how we manage our backend. So, plus the systems and processes that we have in place, we're very high tech for a craft-based furniture making company. We're incredibly high tech in our backend.
Like how? Give
So,
me an
so
example.
I have on my phone, I have data about everything that's happening in the company, not just financial data. That, of course, but production data. So
Yeah.
I can be sitting anywhere in the world, and every component I know on an hourly basis what's being made, how much wood is being consumed, which material is being consumed. So I can track anything on my phone, and
So you
those are the
have
kinds of
like an
systems.
in-house app, like every
We use a few applications from different vendors, but we have, so to create a business, to be able to do what we do, it's not enough to just make fantastic products. There's a whole system working behind it, and then that's where my experience. I don't come from a design background. I don't come from a manufacturing background. I don't come from a craft background. I got into this. I was nearly 40 when I started Phantom Hands. So, but all the other training that I've had has sort of come to the fore here, and that's what makes it a business that works.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, a lot of home companies like Jaipur Rugs, a lot of decor companies have really done well during the last 2 years because of COVID, because of everyone being at home and focusing on their home interiors. Will you tell me how it's worked out for Phantom Hands?
We've had the same experience too. Of course, 2020, when the first COVID lockdown happened, was a really bad period for us because nobody knew what was going on, and we shut down the workshop completely for a couple of months. But after that, we've we've seen an increase in sales in, especially I think the Indian market has grown for us over the last. I think our India sales has doubled over the last 12 months. Clearly, I think some part of it has got to do with the fact that people are spending more time at home, or very much more conscious about the kind of objects they want in their home, and that has helped us too. I think Asia in general has been a huge revelation for us in the last 2 years. We've actually seen a bit of a decline in sales in Europe, but India, Taiwan, even China, Japan, they've more than made up for it. Singapore. So, I'm very bullish on Asia. So
I want to ask you, how is it possible for a company to maintain its profitability as well as to ensure that the artisan or the maker of the craft is benefited substantially? What is your theory on this?
I think, very honestly, I think because we are able to do it because the value of our product, the intrinsic value of our product, captures in a way what it takes to compensate your artisans, compensate your entire ecosystem. So our products are not necessarily the cheapest. We are at a certain price point because we need to be able to do all of this to the artisan. So again, going back to your question, when you buy a Phantom Hands product, it's not just the value of the wood or the actual value of the material that's gone into it. You're actually, in some ways, being responsible for the entire ecosystem. So
isn't there always a danger of taking more and giving less?
Perhaps. I don't know how to answer this question, but I know that we take it very seriously. We very often, there are a lot of things that actually these are perhaps not even special things, but just hygiene factors that everyone, I believe, should do. Things
should
like
follow.
should
Absolutely.
follow. Just to give you an example, every employee, every craftsman in Phantom Hands, it has complete health insurance coverage for themselves and their families. Obviously, they're all on PF and pension. They have all those benefits. Our average craftsmen probably get paid more than an average software engineer in Bangalore. So
Are
we're
you
not.
serious?
Yeah, but why should that even be surprising? Why do they not deserve it?
Because it's a rarity.
Yeah. But but it should, I think we should get to a point where this is not even a surprise. It's why don't they deserve it? And that's the reason why we're losing our craft. So my best crafts artisans don't want their children to get into this profession. They want their children to become engineers or whatever. And the irony is that they will probably make less money in that profession than they will working for a company like Phantom Hands. But maybe there are very few companies like us who actually take care or pay those level of wages. So I don't know, but it's
Well,
yeah.
I'm very happy to hear this. More power to you. More power to Phantom Hands and all the other hands you support.
Thank you, Namrata.
It's been wonderful chatting, Deepak. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed the show or not, write to me on Instagram, Twitter, or Clubhouse at Namrata Zakaria. For updates on Tell Me How You Did It, follow us at HT Smartcast. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse. To listen to more podcasts, log on to htsmartcast.com or suno naye nazariye se.